Hello, this is Deadman Walking. Today we're going to be discussing bunkering in versus bugging out. So to start things off, we're just going to start with the definitions of bunkering in and bugging out. So bunkering in is when you've decided to have all your prep and supplies, or your prep and supplies. You've decided not to leave your house for your apocalypse. When I mention apocalypse, that's just a grid down scenario. If you want to know more, just check out the earlier podcast on the types of apocalypse, where I sort of explained different types of, bug out scenarios, or in this case, bunkering in scenarios. So, bunkering in has its advantages and disadvantages, as I'll discuss later, and so the next one to discuss would be bugging out. Bugging out is in your type of apocalypse. You want to get the hell out of Dodge, basically. So you don't want to be there anymore. You want to move. Maybe you live in a urban environment and you need to get to a more rural environment. So might that be a farmhouse or a manor house or something, somewhere in the countryside, away from society, or the breakdown of society. So, they each have their advantages and disadvantages. I'm hoping I probably won't be able to cover all of them because I can't. But I can't think of these. But these are just a few of the things I came up with for bunkering in and bugging out. So bunkering in, the advantages are both of these. We'll mention now. Both of these are prepping idealisms. So this isn't a survival. Well, it is a survival situation, but this is prepping specifically. So if you're bunkering in, the advantage is you have supplies stockpiled. So that might be your 25 years of baked beans or whatever. You can start farming. People have allotments. Even in urban environment, people have gardens in the back where they grow their own vegetables. Obviously, this is only a small proportion of their garden, but they still might have a month's worth of vegetables from that garden. This is very long-term survival stuff, essentially, if you want to survive the apocalypse, I guess. Also, alternative energy. This is becoming quite commonplace in homes, not just around the world, or places where they can't have mains electricity, such as solar panels or even hydroelectric in some places. The environment, that's another thing. It's home sweet home, I guess, the home comforts. You know where everything is, and that also ties in with fortifications. You can easily begin to fortify your home. Obviously, you probably don't want to do this before the collapse of society or the apocalypse, but you can have things ready to put on. So this might be hurricane protection, often have places, or fences. Some houses are a bit security conscious. But bunkering in also doesn't just mean having a physical bunker. That could just be your house. Obviously, this is long term, so this would be a very suitable scenario for long-term living, I guess, or attempted living. But the problem with this is that if you're in a urban environment, you have a high risk, because if raiders or bad people, I guess, see your house and you've got lights on, barricades, searchlights, all that sort of stuff, they're going to see that as a target, and they know you're protecting something valuable, and they're going to try and get in. So this could lead to conflict, and probably will lead to conflict, which kind of defeats the object of prepping if you're having all your stuff taken from you. Unless you live in a rural environment, a lot of rural houses in the middle of nowhere often have long-term supplies. Obviously, it's not 25 years, but they'll still, if they get isolated for a few days in the winter, they would still have those supplies. So bunkering in, both these scenarios I will mention vary. They sometimes you could bunker in for 2 years, then get attacked, so you might need to bug out in that scenario. So that brings us closely onto bugging out. So bugging out is as I mentioned before, is when you have a kit. Maybe most people hear a bob or a bug out bag. Having bugging out doesn't just mean having one small bag of things. It could be an entire convoy full of items, I guess. But most of the time, bugging out is on foot. See, it's nice to have a vehicle, but obviously you can't. That brings unwanted attention. That means you're a target. If you have anything in the downfall of society, you will become a target. Anything at all. So, it's the risk you probably must be willing to take, I guess, if you're trying to bug out. So, bugging out works most effectively if it's right at the start of when things start to go sour. Or if you need to evacuate from, say, your home. Say you've been living in your home for 2 years, and then suddenly you get attacked by a militia, an angry militia of maybe a gang or something which has risen up, or hostile government. You don't know. So bugging out would be a suitable scenario for that. So I'll just go through a few advantages. The advantages are you leave a hostile area, because maybe at the start, or maybe 5 months down the line it still will turn hostile, or you need to leave for food reasons. Maybe you need more supplies. Less risk. There's obviously going to be some risk. It's the apocalypse after all, but less risk of being raided where everything is gone. If you're on foot, it's a lot easier to escape than hide a house. Hiding houses can be done. People have successfully camouflaged their buildings, but in an urban environment, hiding buildings, it's quite hard, unless it's in plain sight. Bugging out is short term. You're not going to last very long, unless foraging, maybe then. But even then, you're still dependent on the environment, which may not last if there's some sort of radioactive or chemical disasters. But it is a short-term problem. A lot of people have 72-hour. That's probably what you want to be, the most you want to be carrying with all the gear. And obviously you can adapt and start whittling down. But 72 hours is normally the extremities people go before you start suffering majorly. Obviously you'll be suffering anyway, but the negative effects of not eating properly, of rationing food, will start to kick in. Some people can go longer. It's 3 days without water in normal scenario, but obviously you don't want to be doing that. So next is if you're bugging out, this could be to meet maybe a family or predetermined, I guess, not preppers as such, but say your family. Say if you've got family who don't live in the local area, the bugging out might be, say if they live in the countryside or the rural environment, you could bug out and meet them. So they would be bunkering in, as in theory, or you could move somewhere else and go to another predetermined location. But the problem with having, say, a large group, or more supplies needed, but there's pros and cons of everything, but we're not going to cover that today. So bugging out, obviously I said about the 72 hours, but to increase that, you could have what are called supply caches, where you have maybe an extra 72 hours in a box on a predetermined location. So if it takes you 24 hours to get halfway to your bug out camp or location or whatever, safety, rescue, you could have, along that 24 hour stretch, you could have a box containing long-term food. So I will do a video, a skills video on the supply caches, because they're quite complex. But the gist is, there's a box buried or hidden somewhere containing supplies. Usually they should be quite cheap, just in case you lose them or they get taken. That can be a problem. So you got to remember where you put them. It's another thing. So you put markers down and things. So I'm just going to go with I get the positives, negatives, sort of a blur, but we're going to go with the negatives. Unless you want to spend your entire life on the road, you will eventually have to settle somewhere to start farming. The food isn't infinite. You're the last man on earth, last woman, whatever, last dog, even if a dog's watching this. you got to think really long term. Obviously, if you're the last person left, then you've got all the food in the world pretty much. But even then, you'll still want to start farming for things. this can lead to problems with farming if you don't know how to farm. There's plenty of books on it, gardening. That's another time for farming stuff. But you will want to settle somewhere. So that's when bugging out, obviously I said it's short term, and then you'll start bunkering in. But then you might get disturbed, so you have to leave all that. Anyway. Bugging out, there is quite a high risk of losing everything, because at least if bunkering in, you can hide things around the premises of your bunker location, I guess. I don't know what it's called. Your house, your premises. But, if you get attacked, maybe a thief or someone takes all your stuff. They don't want to kill you, but they will still take your stuff. People do desperate things at desperate times. They'll take all your stuff, unless you, conceal all your kit around yourself. It's obviously going to be in a rucksack or a bag of trolley or whatever in the car. They'll take that, and they can see that. But that's a problem. Also, limited supplies as well. You can only, as I said before, 72 hours. It sounds like a long time, 72 hours, but if you're trying to survive for 10, 20, 30 years, 72 hours isn't very long. That's 3 days, in case you didn't think of that already. So I'm just going to end it there. It's a bit of a ramble. Quite a long one. Longest podcast. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, Deadman walking out. But, forgot to mention, if you liked this podcast, I do them every week. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. If you got any comments, just put them in the comments section below, or message me over YouTube. Anyway, thank you very much. Deadman walking out.